Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there.
So Wilds did an interesting thing on the TV show, which was he made the point that if the Patriots fired Bill Belichick and then surveyed this was before Vrabel got fired, and surveyed the landscape, they're like, okay, who's the best coach available? They'd land on Bill Belichick. The idea, you know what I mean? He said it was the same thing as the moment the Raiders cut Derek Carr. They're like, okay, we need a quarterback. Who should we sign? That someone would come to him and be like, well, here's this guy, and it'd be Derek Carr. That the guy you're getting rid of is the best available. So the opposite of that thought exercise is this. It's about to be, what, half a dozen jobs open? If Nick Sirianni were fired, would anyone hire him to be their head coach? If the answer to that is no, then you have to ask yourself, should he be ours? And I know that sounds harsh, and I know that sounds too much, but I would remind people, in Philadelphia, Andy Reid, 14 years, 5 conference championship games, a Super Bowl appearance, 9 playoff appearances, 8 double-digit win seasons, 1 bad year gone.
With B and C quarterbacks mostly.
1 bad year gone. Replaced by Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly, 10-6. The next year, didn't make it to the end of year 3 after back-to-back 10-win seasons. Doug Peterson wins a Super Bowl with a backup quarterback. The next year, wins a playoff game with a backup quarterback. The next year, makes the playoffs. The next year, a bad season, gone. So this idea that Sirianni's untouchable, Gary Kubiak, I looked it up today, was 46-18 with the Broncos. Went to the division round 4 times, went to a Super Bowl, and they fired him. They were like, you know what? You're out of here. So if the Eagles lose 6 of 7 down the stretch, and the losses are the Niners by 1 million, win that game, I'm going to go through it because think about it. That Niners game, the Niners had 3 losses, the Eagles had 1. That would have locked up the 1 seed with 6 weeks to go. You'd be 4 games up with 5 games left. You know what I mean? The Niners would have then had 4 losses, and the tiebreaker would have been to you. They get blown out. Okay, that sucks. The next week, they could have locked up the NFC East against Dallas. They would have swept Dallas. Dallas would have 5 losses. They get blown out. The next week, Drew Lock has the only relevant moment of his NFL career, 92 yards to win the game. You then, escape against Tommy DeVito. Then Kyler drives the field on you, hanging 35. And then Tyrod Taylor is up 24-0 at halftime on your starters. If then you lose to Baker, oh boy. Like it is rough. And there are real questions about what is this team right now, aside from a play that is likely going to be banned next year. What do you do well? And I don't know the answer.
Hey, I can argue it's become Brandon Staley. At the end with Brandon Staley, he argued, hey, we're losing close games. We're not getting blown out, his quote.
Yeah.
Then they got blown out, and it's like, okay. So Sirianni's like, hey, these are go either way games. And then you fall behind 24-0 to the Giants. So not that it was a mutiny, but with Staley and Nick, by the way, you know who the Eagles were going to hire if not Nick Sirianni? They liked Staley. So they were looking for a young voice. And so when you start going from narrow losses, there's 2 or 3 things that I always think about. You go from narrow losses, okay, to ugly losses. And then you ask yourself, with the Chargers at the end, Herbert, before the injury, had regressed. Jalen Hurts has regressed. There is nothing the Chargers or the Eagles do well now. There's nothing.
Well, and so then the other problem is, it's like, well, let's not forget the year he just got last year out of Jalen Hurts. And then you ask yourself the really tough question of, you watch Indy this year? Because and you watch what Shane Steichen was able to cobble together with Gardner Minshew. I understand the last play of the last game didn't go well, but they were a yard away from maybe being in the playoffs with that Indy roster. And there's your big chess move was demoting your D coordinator and promoting Patricia, and now your defense is worse than it was. Your quarterback has regressed. You're not going to have more talent in the future. The best offensive line, 7 first-round draft picks on your defensive line, 2 stud receivers. So folks, I'll 8-mile myself here a bit. Folks think I don't like Sirianni because he told Chiefs fans to fuck off after they won that game.
Right.
That is not it. But that is a noteworthy moment.
Yeah.
Because it was the same way, I pointed out last year in the lead up to the postseason when they're blowing the Giants out in the playoff game and that little sky cam gets him and he does that mean mug, like shaking his head, yes. And then in the Super Bowl, when they're going to get a challenge gone their way and he's kind of histrionically showing, pointing one way and Jalen Hurts has to stop him like, hey, man, what are you doing? He felt to me like a bit of a front runner, like a guy that is really good when things are going good. And in his defense, it was like, well, we don't know how he's going to respond when things are going poorly because they've never gone poorly. Well, now they are, and it's going disastrously. So I think it's at least a question if Philly loses.
DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is bringing you, an offer that'll help you win money in the NFL playoffs. New customers, bet $5. That's it. $5. That's it. $5. Any game and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Are you kidding me? I bet 5. That's it. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. It takes 90 seconds and put in Colin, Colin. Easy peasy. New customers, $5. That's all you have to bet. And get $200 instantly in bonus bets only on the DraftKings Sportsbook. The code is Colin, Colin. And the crown is yours. Well, here's another topic. First impressions matter. I've used the American Idol example a million times. I don't know anything about music other than I enjoy it. But I can listen. I can watch American Idol and say, that's a hack. That's a star. That's an employable lounge singer. And I know nothing about music. That Dan Campbell has sort of a blue-collar work ethos and a likability where the average fan who's busting his ass for a living is going to love him. He's really a guy a fan would like to have a beer with. Dan's opening press conference was embarrassing. Just novice, eat your kneecaps is bad. And he was 4-19 and 1 to start. And then, things start working out. I've said this before, the star of that franchise is not Goff or Dan Campbell or Ben Johnson. It's the front office. They've had back-to-back incredible drafts, great drafts. And so then he gets a bunch of good players and they start winning a wonky division where Aaron Rodgers leaves, the Bears are a tire fire, and Kirk Cousins is, sort of okay. And they win and they deserve credit for it. But now you're watching Dan Campbell and you're going, he's a little over his skis. He's a bit of a meathead. Sirianni had the worst press conference I've ever seen. Could not speak. Acknowledged it. Very turbulent, like Dan Campbell early. Steichen comes in, elevates the offense. He leaves. They stink. And in both instances, I ripped both. I said, Dan came off as sort of a very limited meathead. And we've seen examples that he's sort of he's the overly aggressive guy.
Emotional. Listen, he's emotional.
He's a fan.
Yeah. And
then Sirianni looks completely over his head. Is that first impressions do matter? You ever watch Sean McVay's first press conference? Obama wasn't that slick. I mean, it was like it was on a prompter. I was like, chest, face forward, looking at the camera. I mean, I literally thought, oh my God, I'd run through who is this 19-year-old?
Right, he was like 32. Yeah.
I was just like, young. Holy hell. First impressions matter. McVay's first press conference knocks your sock off. And that I think that if you go back to Sirianni and Dan Campbell, there are qualities about both that are endearing. But man, if you can't get the opening presser right, I've said
it's
this
a
before.
real thing. Go ahead.
Nobody wants to say this, but it does matter. We elect people based on, are they telegenic? Are they good at the podium? If you can't get through 4.5 to 8 minutes on a podium, by the way, you've flown in, you've thought about it. You know there's going to be tough questions. You're preparing for
well, so that last part I think is the most interesting, because I wonder if some of these guys would be better if they didn't know it was that day, if it was off the cuff. Like Sirianni's thing to me, Campbell was a different story. This guy's a former player. I think players are going to, I looked at that press conference and said, I totally get why motivationally he's going to be excellent, why players might relate to him. And that very moment I said, listen, I get it. I'm a nerd. I didn't play. I understand. But in that moment, I was like, my guess is he's not going to be great at the situational football stuff. Now, he actually has been shockingly good at, he does follow the quote analytics, but it's just really what he's doing is he just wants to go for it every time. And the analytics support going for it. But I think it's almost by accident that he's following it because it's like super aggressive, go, go, go. But you saw the cartoonish end result of that when he went for that 2-point conversion from the 7-yard line, which is one of the worst decisions.
He was a fan.
Exactly. He was an angry fan that was like, this is bullshit. I got screwed. I'm going to show you. So that's different. Sirianni's thing was he seemed nervous. Like, I bet Sirianni, if he had not been told there was a press conference coming, I think he was hurt by the fact he had thought about it all night. But that's a different type of concern. That means when things get tight, are you going to get tight? When that means, you know what I mean? When the pressure gets up, are you going to respond or not? So that was a different level of concern. So the reason I brought the whole Sirianni thing up was I have a different kind of galaxy brain question for you, which is this. If they lose to Tampa and they fire him, isn't that the perfect spot for Belichick? You have all that talent on defense. The offensive skill position guys are there. They're already there.
And your weakness is drafting. Howie Roseman's an expert at it.
Exactly right. And it's like, hey, you've got however limited Jalen Hurts might be, even if last year was an aberration, the best quarterback he will have had in a half decade. He will look at Jalen Hurts like he is Patrick Mahomes 2.0 when he's been dealing with Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi and the last, legs of Cam Newton. The offense is in place. The defense has all this blue chip talent up front, and Belichick's been getting the most out of secondary players and linebackers for 20 years. This Patriots defense doesn't have stars on it, and they're awesome. Like, the stars are hurt, Judon and Gonzalez. And that is why, if I were Philly and I lose to Tampa, I wouldn't fire Sirianni to fire Sirianni. But I sure as shit would consider it if I got on good intel. Bill Belichick, he wants to stay in the Northeast.
Yeah.
He wants to go with the blue chip. People are like, maybe Atlanta. I'm like, Bill Belichick doesn't want to coach the Falcons, be in the set. Like, stay in a cold weather, northeastern city with a blue chip franchise, chance to break Shula's record, chance to get to the Super Bowl. That, to me, is a hand in glove fit that I would strongly consider if I were all parties.